Vancouver Hockey Show, Andrew Wadden, producer Aaron, off-season edition. As we're going to take a look, Aaron, today at the Canucks, their salary cap, and perhaps what they might or might not do before July 1st, because they got some work to do with their own free agents, as you know.
Oh man, wait a second. What? I haven't turned over the calendar yet. Hang on. Wait, it's June.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
all right. Okay. Well.
Yeah, and guess what? The Stanley Cup might get handed out 3 weeks from now. Oh, and it doesn't start for another 5 days.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
This all makes perfect sense. Yeah. Let's hand out the cup on the summer solstice. Yeah. Like
I heard something today on a different radio show podcast, and they suggested that, you could be winning a cup on June 24th and a week later be on a different team.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally.
Yeah.
July 1st, a week later, you could be on a different team. I mean, that's not anything abnormal because of the fact that, the cup does get handed out. And it just seems that this year, it's way too far. Anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves as well, because who knows? The cup could be wrapped in 4 games. And we'll get to some Stanley Cup final talk in just a bit here. But let's focus in back into the Canucks, and let's we could do a rewind here and take a look at what is left on the table in terms of money and who's going to get some of that money from the Canucks. Now, they got $24 million in cap space. I rounded it up. It's like 23.7, whatever. Let's round it up to $24 million. And I'm looking at things today, and I'm wondering where exactly they're going to spend it on. Top 6 winger, of course. They definitely want that. Perhaps even 2. 1 top pair defenseman, 1 second pair defenseman, and 2 third pair, unless you think Noel Juleson can hold down one of those third pair spots next year. And he very well could, being a right shot guy. And he showed well this year for the Canucks. But let's see who's coming back here from the Canucks. And as I take a look at the free agents, Tyler Myers, Dakota Joshua, Teddy Bluger, Sam Lafferty, Elias Lindholm, Ian Clark, Mark Friedman. I'm not even going to include Mark Friedman. Nikita Zadorov, obviously, being a big one as well. And they've got a couple of RFAs to take care of, and a big one being Philip Hronek. I started to think about, where the ceiling should be for these players. How high would I go if I was GM Patrick Allvin? And one player that I'm kind of circled, and I think Canuck fans would be interested in bringing back, funny enough, is Tyler Myers, who a lot of fans threw under the bus many times over the years. But he showed well last season and proved that he can be a reliable defenseman. And, I think that has a lot to do with the fact that the roster is also a much better, or much improved at least, since the 5 years that he was there previously. But if I'm thinking about Tyler Myers and I'm thinking about him returning, and I know the fact that he wants to return to Vancouver, we hold the cards in this one, it feels like. I'm not going higher, Aaron, on Tyler Myers on an AAV of $3 million.
Yeah, that seems pretty fair.
I feel like if you were really to flesh out that, the 6 defensemen, whether it's, 6 through 8, but the top 6 of the defensive pairings, like I feel like Myers could be reliable on that third pair. And I suggested, perhaps maybe Noah Juleson could be that guy. I'd probably feel more comfortable if it was Tyler Myers back there. Limited minutes. Obviously, we've seen with Tyler Myers that when you do limit the minutes, he's just a better player and, take down the matchups in terms of, the tougher matchups that he's going to have to face. So if I'm the Canucks, I'm going to Tyler Myers, and I might give him an extra year. It feels like, 2-year deal is probably, what most teams would be offering in free agency. If I'm the Canucks, I might give you that extra year. I might go 3 years times 3. Now he's 34 years old, but he turned 34 in February. So he will be, 34 going into next season. So by the time that contract expires, he'd be 37 years old. And we've seen stay-at-home defensemen, get longer in the tooth and still perform in the NHL, still be reliable. It's one of those roles too, that when you play in the league, like you kind of get better at it as you go along because of the amount of experience you have. And, for someone like Myers, he can play lower down the lineup. So if I am going to offer him, like I said, it's 3 times 3. We'll give you that extra year. We know you love being here. And, I think the fans embraced him a little bit.
And had a pretty good showing in the playoffs,
yeah.
too, right? So,
no, he had a solid year. And I mentioned it on our last pod. Like the final year of his 6-year contract was his best year with the Canucks. And you can't teach size, and he's got plenty of it. Right shot guy as well, which is always very valuable for teams. Now, if you're Tyler Myers, or excuse me, if I'm Patrick Alvin, I do say to Tyler Myers, like, we don't have to get this done before July 1st. And in fact, I might even not offer anything right away. Might let him go to market, see what he can find. But again, I'd be very surprised if teams go, higher than $3 million on the AAV with more than 2 years. Could I see a 2-year deal at $6 million from somebody? Yeah, I could see that. Maybe in a 2-year deal at $7 million.
It'd be a meal for sure.
It'd be lots of meals for the whole family. So it'd be interesting to see with Tyler Myers. But again, I'm not opposed to him coming back. Dakota Joshua, my ceiling for him is $4 million. And that is, I'm not, like, that's where I'm going at the end. My negotiation definitely doesn't start there.
Because remind me again, how much was he making?
Oh, $850. He hadn't hit a contract yet. Like, if you remember, like, the Canucks found him. Like, he was a Leafs draft pick. He decided he stayed in college. He decided to not sign with the Leafs. And from what is out there, it sounds like he didn't want to sign in Toronto because at the time he thought he wasn't going to be able to crack that forward group. And he goes to St. Louis. And then, of course, the Canucks end up pulling him out of there. So it was a really good find in terms of your pro scout. But this is his chance, Aaron. He's 28 years old right now. And yeah, so he'll be 28 going into next season as well because his birthday's in May. So it's his time to, cash in, if you will. $4 million, like I said, is not going to be my starting point, but that's probably as high as I would go with Dakota Joshua. We've seen Dakota Joshuas in the past that have gotten their payday and not been able to hold up their end of the bargain. So you got to be a little wary about where you're going to go with Joshua. Do you think he can be, 40-point guy, maybe perhaps 20 goals, maybe, 15 assists, 35 points, something in that area. But at the same time, too, he also brings to you more than just offense, right? Gets in on the forecheck, is able to dig pucks out, set up his teammates. So,
and I'm sure somebody's passed him by now, but he up until the Canucks were eliminated, like had the most hits in the playoffs. So of all players,
I just don't really value that stat, Aaron.
I mean, but I'm just saying, like, he was getting physical.
Yeah, no, I get you. I hear that, but I feel like it's a little.
I'm not rating a contract based on number of hits. No.
They will though. His agent will come in and definitely will point that out. And the reason why I don't rate that is because, and I've heard plenty of people talk about it over the years. Like, if you're hitting, that means your team doesn't have the puck. Mm-hmm. Now, if it's getting in on the forecheck and be able to dig it out and, create a scoring opportunity, absolutely. Right. And Dakota does bring that. In fact, I would try to get Dakota done before July 1st, because I think if he hits market, somebody might give him that extra, $500K,
a little sprinkling.
Yeah, right. Like somebody, and again, you got to be careful with those kind of contracts because really it's just 1 year in terms of sample size.
But as his best buddy, friend, pal on the line, Garland said, people are aware of the team now. And if you have the opportunity to snag somebody just to disrupt things on that other team, why wouldn't you, right?
Yeah, no, I hear you on that end. So Joshua and Myers, I'm open to them coming back, but got to make sure that it is at the right price. And you got to be firm on that price as well. Teddy Bluger, I saw on his Instagram saying, we'll be back. And it was a recent post, actually. And, it was just the Canucks celebrating. It was a couple of, but I mean, is he telling us that, he knows that there's a deal in place? Now, Teddy Bluger's not going to cost a whole lot. He made 1.9 last year. My ceiling would be pretty much that. Might give you an extra bump, 2 million maybe. But also at the same time too, like, he's not a huge priority to me, right? So Teddy Bluger, I would be welcome to come back, but we got to make sure that the price is right. Sam Lafferty, I don't care either way what happens with Sam Lafferty. Elias Lindholm is not coming back, folks. And the only way I see Elias Lindholm coming back is if a major trade happens that shakes up the core, right? And even with that, there's no guarantees because I think Lindholm's going to be pretty valued in the free agent market. So,
and I think it would be so big that we wouldn't even notice that Lindholm's sticking around because everybody would just
because everyone would be
focused on the big one.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, and if you're talking core, well, they're not going to trade JT Miller. I know Besser's going into the final year of his contract, but I feel like there's going to be an extension around the corner. We did mention on the past pod that Elias Pettersson has no trade protection in year one. And now that would be just that would blow the roof off this city.
Well, maybe the league even, right? Like,
yeah, well, because big time players don't especially guys that just are about to start an 8-year contract, don't get traded. So I think I said it on the last pod. I do not expect that to happen. But you never know with Rutherford and Alvi.
It'd be entertaining for sure.
And if you are, one of those teams that's looking for top flight center, and you're sniffing around going, maybe we could pull this guy out of there it's a massive long shot. Don't think it's going to happen. But again, to put a bow on Lindholm there, the way I see him staying is if they do, move out a significant amount of money. So Elias Lindholm, it was fun while you lasted here, but I think it's happy trails for him.
Until we meet again.
Exactly. Zadorov. Now, he was asked about, getting priced out of the market, and, he asked about it. And I did see on Murph's Twitter today that he was golfing with Zadorov and Miller, and I can't remember what the caption was, but something about help him with the negotiation, something like that. So when you see things like that, kind of makes you wonder, but at the same time too, this is a big deal for Zadorov. This is probably going to be one of his last contracts, maybe his second last contract, depending on how many years he gets out of people, because he is getting close to 30 now.
Just laughing to myself over here, imagining Zadorov walking around downtown Vancouver, just randomly stopping people. How much do you think I'm worth? How much do you think I'm worth? How much do you think I'm worth?
Well, how much do you think I think he's worth? Because I think it's $5 million.
Yeah.
I don't think I want to go higher than that, Aaron.
No.
I'll go 6 years. I'll go 6 years if that's the case. Even as I say that out loud, actually, those last few years might be awful. But, as we saw with Tyler Myers, he aged actually better than when he came in here. So, but again, it's just such a delicate balance when it comes to the cap and how you got to allocate things. Zadorov's not a top pair guy. And obviously he's not going to play top pair with Quinn Hughes being two left shots. I know Zadorov can flirt on both sides, but I'm pretty sure Rick Tocchet wants to find, a right shot guy to saddle with Hughes. So I'm open to Zadorov coming back. The price has got to be right. And again, it feels like the Canucks hold the cards because it sounds like he wants to stay here. And it sounds like his family was very interested in putting some roots down here as well.
And he sure had a hell of a time in the playoffs. So yeah.
He was the third best player for the Canucks in the playoffs, I guess, behind Miller, Besser. I mean, maybe fourth, because she lost was pretty damn good too. Actually, now Lindholm was pretty good as well. So, but yeah, with Zadorov, you can't, if you start getting, they start talking about 6 million plus, that's when you really got to be hesitant, right? That's the Jim Benning contracts that used to get handed out. Don't know if we want those, or at least another one of those. Now in the RFA, Ian Cole, happy trails. Thanks for your time. I mean, maybe he's 35 years old though now, Aaron. I don't know if the Canucks would even consider, bringing Cole back. And after his playoff, I don't think a lot of the, fan base want to bring him back as well. But if he's a bottom pair guy and he costs you peanuts.
Hey, Edmonton might pick him up. He was pretty good for them. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're absolutely right about that. Again, he's another guy I let go to market. And if he circles back and isn't getting a lot of sniffs, then maybe we talk. But you're a very low priority, Mr. Cole. Now, Casey DeSmith's also a UFA, but again, happy trails. I think he's out of here. Obviously, Arthur Sheloff has proved that, he's NHL ready. Let's be careful about a contract with him right now. Now, Casey DeSmith was able to get himself, I believe his AAV last year was 1.8 million. And it was a 2-year deal, but it wasn't signed by, that was negotiated by Ron Hextall when he was running the Penguins. So feels like a bit of an overpay for Casey DeSmith, but I think at the time they were thinking that perhaps he was going to be, one of the guys there. They had a bit of a flux when it came to their goaltending between Murray and who am I forgetting right now? The other Pittsburgh goaltender. Regardless, it doesn't really matter. It just feels like that might have 1.8 for Casey DeSmith, considering that Jerry, by the way, was what I was thinking of. It would have been a bit of an overpay at that time. But that's kind of where I see Sheloff's right now. And I kind of want to bring it down a little bit as well. Like you were great in the playoffs. We asked you to do a whole lot.
You stepped up when you were called.
We've seen this again. I go back to go to Joshua. Like we have seen this before in the NHL though. Goaltenders that are, backups, whatever, third strings, injuries happen. They come into the playoffs and they're able to, prove well, but then can't back it up, later on in their career. So not saying that I think Sheloff's is that guy. He's not like the Hamburglar from back in the day with the Ottawa Senators.
Or a Zamboni driver.
That's a little different there, Aaron. But I mean, if 1.5, 2-year deal, why not? I wonder if the Sheloff's camp would be fine with that. I think they would. They're probably going to be pushing for somewhere around, the $2 million range, but sample size is too small for me to be coughing up that kind of dough. So if it's a 1.5, 2 years, let's shake hands. Let's get it done right now. He's RFA as well, as you know. So,
and with that, you're also expecting them to go tandem too, right?
I am. It's not that I'm expecting them. That's what I would like to see. But, and by tandem too, I don't even know if that's the right sort of, because tandem would mean like 41-41, right? You're splitting it right down the middle. That's not happening. Thatcher Demko is a Vezina finalist. This kid came in and stood on his head and was able to win a series and was decent against the Oilers, but ultimately, couldn't get them past Edmonton. Demko's still the man, right? So if it's a 50, 31 or 32 thing, that's probably where I would like it to be. And, if you're Thatcher Demko,
I could still consider that a tandem considering it's Demko as number one. So
yeah, I guess so. Sure. I think we're splitting hairs here.
No, but we're on the same wavelength with this one where it's like Demko's getting a little more. Yeah. I don't expect it to be 50-50 down the middle, but
I think Demko probably wants somewhere like 55. But again, like if you're the Canucks, hey, Thatcher, you've been through a few injuries now. Right? Like we've got to figure out a way to keep you fresh, come playoffs. So yeah, with Sheloff's, like I said, if it's a 2-year deal, if it's, an AAV of 1.5, so 2 years, $3 million, if they can get that done, I would do it right away. Hronek is the tough one. And we've talked about this. My ceiling, $7 million. And I don't think that's going to get it done with that camp. I think they feel that Phil Hronek is worth 8, So if that's the case, Phil, we're going to have to move on. But he's an RFA. So he's a trade chip at that point, right? Now, Frank Saravalli, that is, stated on his podcast that he wouldn't be shocked if Martin Necas is dealt before Saturday. Now, why do I bring up that name? Well, there's been some talk, and I know that we put it out on our social media as well, asking people, would you trade? Because Necas is RFA as well, so you do have to get that done in terms of the contract. But would you trade Hronek for Necas? And it was overwhelming, the amount of people that would do it. But I saw Dollywall talking on his show today saying that, like, that's not going to get it done. So that means, perhaps there'd be more. Maybe you got to add a draft pick. Maybe you got to add, some sort of sprinkle basically, or, to make it happen. But to me, I wonder if there's better options for the Canucks out there. Now, Hronek and Hughes were a good pair together. And that is a top pair, defenseman in Hronek. But again, at that price, so let's just say that they were to do Hronek, Joshua, and Myers and do them at the top end that we talked about. Well, that's $14 million for 3 guys. And you got $10 million still to figure out. And you need 3 more guys still to fill out that roster. And one of them's a top pair winger. So that's going to be tough. You're going to be bargain basement if you're, going to spend money on a top pair guy and then try to flesh out the rest of the lineup. So I wonder if Hronek has, in the words of that reporter to Zadorov, perhaps priced himself out of this market. I'd be okay with it too. I know we talked about that before. Just not a massive fan. I wonder if the money can be spent better for the Canucks. Okay, I said on the last pod that we were going to talk a bit about the Stanley Cup playoffs still. Well, the final is now set with the Edmonton Oilers winning in Game 6. They'll face the Florida Panthers in what's going to be an unreal Stanley Cup final. And when I say Stanley Cup final, Aaron, it's not the finals. It is the Stanley Cup final. There is just one. The amount of media people that I hear calling it the finals is absolutely ridiculous. The NBA calls their final the finals. Who knows why? There's only one.
Yep.
Like, I don't get it.
There's no two trophies in the NBA.
Exactly. So come on, guys. Just stop being so damn lazy. And I don't know. That bothers me. I don't know why it bothers me, but it does. But the Game 6 that happened on between the Oilers and Stars, that was great. I mean, it wasn't a great game, but it was kind of like the Oilers took a page out of the Canucks book. 10 shots on goal and able to win the game. Like, that's Canucks hockey right there, right? I like that the Oilers adjusted their game to fit the playoffs. They didn't try to run and gun and, outscore their opponent. They've decided that they're going to play defense. You got to do, like, you have to adjust your game come playoffs. And I think the Canucks are going to get a valuable lesson in that, in terms of, the experience that they got in the playoffs. Now, the Canucks do play defensive hockey very well. I just don't think that they had, the right roster to really be able to take down the Oilers. As we've seen, some of the bottom end guys in the Oilers really stepping up here. So the Canucks, to me, they're behind, really, when it comes to Edmonton and when it comes to Dallas even as well. And Dallas, they had a tough fight to get through this whole thing. Right. And they just basically, I don't know if they ran out of steam in the end, but the Oilers were just the better team. But look at the Stars going forward.
Well, even if the Canucks did make it through, I think they'd have a really hard time making it past the Stars.
I agree with that as well. But look at the Stars' young core, like, moving forward. Hintz, Robertson, Heiskanen, Ottinger, Johnston, Stankoven, Harley, Dellandrea. And they got that young kid Bork, who was AHL MVP, who was a first-round pick of theirs, I believe, in 2020. Like, they're not going away, right? Like, you talk about what you need in terms of, to be a contending NHL team, top line center, obviously. You need, scoring wingers. You need that top flight number one defenseman. You need an elite goaltender. Like, they have all of that, right? And the funny thing about that as well is they got Heiskanen, Robertson, and Ottinger all in the same draft year, which is just mind-blowing. So they've done an incredible job there in Dallas. And looking at it through a Canucks prism, like, there's going to be one of the teams that you're going to have to get through if you're going to, want to win the West and ultimately get yourself to a Stanley Cup.
A template to mold into.
Yes. So, when it comes to roster construction, that's why I'm so, I shouldn't say against, but just wary of Hronek. Like, they need to spend their dollars properly, because they don't want to find themselves in a difficult cap situation. Now, obviously, you'd love to have some guys coming up through the organization like the Stars do with, young players like Harley and Stankoven and Bork, Johnston as well. Man, Johnston's just an absolute stud. But, they're lucky in that regard because they drafted well. The Canucks don't have, that luxury right now. Now, some of you listening might be like, well, Jonathan Lekkerimäki and, Tom Wielander. And yeah, that's great. I even saw somebody say on our one of our social media comments saying, Wielander is going to be able to replace. No, he's not. He's got 1 year of college under his belt. He's not coming to the NHL next year. So we can't get ahead of ourselves just yet here, right? Lekkerimäki might be a different story. You might see Lekkerimäki come, mid-season next year. If he's killing it in the AHL, and they got a spot for him in Vancouver, perhaps, might even see him, like Bork here, who was able to show up for the Stars late in the playoffs, right? So with those guys, let's let them become, who they should be. You do not want to be rushing
a little bit.
Exactly.
Let it develop.
Yes. Get that AHL experience for Lekkerimäki, which is going to be great because he's got a new head coach, or I guess the Abbotsford Canucks have a new head coach in Manny Malhotra. And I think we failed to mention that in the last pod, which I think is a really good move for the Canucks. He's well respected around the NHL, obviously.
I think the announcement came out after we hit published on the last episode. So there we go. Yeah.
So, well respected around the NHL, well respected with the Canucks organization. Fans loved Manny during his time here. He's one of those guys that you win a Stanley Cup with. They came close, obviously, weren't ultimately able to do it, but guys like Manny Malhotra are guys that, the Canucks need to find another Manny Malhotra, right? And whether, they might be looking for that. Like, I know Bluger perhaps could be in the cards for the Canucks, but he's fourth line, center. Maybe they're going to be looking elsewhere for that. What's Pia Suter going to be next year? Like, when I look at the lines, and now we're going back on the Canucks here. When I look at the lines, like, is Suter best, playing on that top line on the wing with Miller and Besser, or is he better suited on a third line at center where they can, perhaps try to get somebody with a little more offensive touch, with Miller and Besser? These are problems that they need to figure out. And, you can look at even that second line. They talked about Pettersson needing more help. Like, talked about Mikheyev being, not slotted properly. Alvin mentioned that. Like, is Mikheyev going to be in your top 6 next year, or is he going to be a third line guy, or are they going to try and move him out as well? Right. So yeah, it's interesting the way the Canucks are going to put all that together, but, taking it full circle here back to the Stars and Oilers, like, that's kind of where they won those, are able to get through the playoffs. So the fact that they had all 4 lines clicking and people contributing, and the Canucks need to figure that out as well. All right. Enough of this, Aaron. Let's move on, and we'll watch the Stanley Cup final, but we got to wait a bit.
But let's just have one more rant. Why the massive break? Like, it's momentum, right? Like, you're getting into people's viewing habits, like just the big, like, I know it's good from a player's perspective for the Panthers and the Oilers at the moment to get a few days off and let some goose eggs like go down a bit. As a fan's perspective, I really think they should have been starting on Wednesday.
Yeah, Wednesday would have been good. Yeah, I agree with that. I do like the few days just to get everybody, that maybe nicked up a little bit more healthy. But there's also two sides of that as well. It's almost like you kind of want them to go right away and see, who can sort of fight through what they're dealing with. But then there's the other side of the coin that's like, no, we're going to get the best hockey if we, allow these players to, have a few days to get themselves right. So I'm with you on that. I think the 5-day break or whatever it is too much. Would have loved to seen it on Wednesday as well. But I do like the gaps between the games as well, especially with the travel. The travel's ridiculous, right?
This is the longest.
It's got to be, right?
It's like the longest distance for any Stanley Cup. So
it's got to be. South Florida to Northern Alberta. Yeah. That's got to be further than Vancouver, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's put a bow on this one. Thanks for listening, everybody. For producer Aaron, I'm Andrew Wadden. We'll talk to you soon.